hepatitis A is it's caused by a virus. It's transmitted by, it's called the fecal-oral route. In other words, the organism enters the body through the mouth and passes out through the bowel movement. And then most of us don't wash our hands thoroughly, and the virus stays under the fingernails. And we prepare foods that other people eat. So you can see it's basically a problem for a household, but in a daycare center, it's sort of like a household.
The jury must decide if Joanna Salyer sodomized and assisted in the raping of her teenage daughters, or if the defendant was herself the victim of an abusive husband. The state's star witnesses have been 4 of Mrs. Salyer's own girls. The teenagers fidgeted in the witness chair today as they remembered obviously painful memories. One 15-year-old daughter testified her mother sodomized her twice a month for 2 years. Her little sister said her mother forced her to commit oral sodomy when she was 9 years old. An Oklahoma City police detective testified Mrs. Salyer admitted molesting a 3rd daughter. When asked, "How many times did you commit oral sodomy on your daughter?" Joanna Salyer reportedly replied, "Twice." When asked, "How many times did your daughter commit oral sodomy on you?" Mrs. Salyer allegedly answered, "The same number." Defense attorneys have said they will attempt to convince the jury that Joanna Salyer's husband forced her to commit the alleged sex crimes. Jerry Salyer is currently serving a 10-year prison term for incest. Scott Wallace, News 4 at the Oklahoma County Courthouse.
She's standing next to me, but she's not really standing next to me, you know. What's standing next to me is more a memory than anything else.
Thoughts are out of my head. I'm putting it.
Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. Dementia comes from the Latin, meaning literally the undoing of the mind. And senile dementia was meant to describe the undoing of the mind because of old age. From the days of Solon in ancient Greece until the recent past, dementia was considered an inevitability of growing old. There was nothing that could be done about it. It was one of the vicissitudes of life to be deplored, but beyond treatment or intervention. But Alzheimer's is not an inevitability. Sometimes Alzheimer's strikes very early.
This man's only 55 years old. He's had it for 6 years. I mean, his kids are young, you know. Yeah, it would hurt, wouldn't it?
They are just to give us input into the criteria and to what the community feels like. It's the type of person and the qualifications that we're looking for in a superintendent. The ultimate responsibility of hiring a superintendent, though, does lie with the board.
Since last November, it's been illegal to park your car on a front lawn in Oklahoma City. Judging by the public response, the law addresses a real problem in town. Already, the city's gotten 468 complaints from citizens about their neighbors' violations. But some of those violators say the law is unfair and even dangerous.
We've had one child on our street hit from running out from between cars. I would rather see him parked up with one wheel way up on the grass and leave a wider area down there so you can see the kids.
That was just the most dramatic complaint heard by the Planning Committee. The group took suggestions from citizens on how to change the strict law, and it heard the city staff suggest 3 modifications of its own. In essence, those revisions create exemptions for individuals and whole neighborhoods that can't comply. Some city councilmen agree that parking on a front lawn is a necessity for some.
But there's another segment of the population in this city that it definitely works a hardship on. And this is the intent, purpose for the possible modification.
This committee took the suggested exemptions and passed them along to a city commission. That group will eventually pass the revisions on to city council, where the lawn parking ordinance could ultimately become more lenient. Bob Donaldson, News 4.
15th Street? Right. Okay, is what I would suggest.
We should make no comment to anyone, including the employees of the division or the press, and that we will be called back at a later date.
Okay, Cap, we're ready for takeoff. Power's cleared us for takeoff on runway 35 right at the Will Rogers Airport. Airspeed right. Airspeed on the left.
You're inside a $7.5 million flight simulator that has just been installed at the FAA complex. The simulator is run by a computer and is moved by hydraulic lifts. There are only a handful of these around the world, and it's capable of more than you might think.
3 mile final. Lost the number 3 engine. We've hit an aircraft. We still got the fire. Fire in number 2 model. We're losing number 3 engine, Captain. All right. Is there an emergency?
As you just saw, any type of emergency situation can be simulated. So you can be sure the pilots of tomorrow are getting a taste of what they can expect in the air. And you as a passenger should be glad they'll be prepared before they have you on board. Thanks for riding with us this evening. Ann Nyberg, News 4.
The Constitution specifically provides that the purpose of the Able Commission is to enforce the alcohol beverage laws of the state. The Constitution is silent on the authorities for cities to license.
It's 10 at Bethany, 9 at Choctaw, 10 degrees in Oklahoma City with light snow in the area, and a wind chill index of 27 below.
And that, if you'll excuse the expression, was the cold, hard truth. But you didn't have to tell people running around downtown how cold it was. It almost got to be a sport, figuring out how fast you could get from one building to another. Any warm, dry place was better than being outside in this.
Take your foot off the pedal. Pump it a couple of times. There you go. Okay, now try it.
Some people had to stay out in the cold a lot longer than they wanted to because their cars refused to start. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of dead batteries around the city. Jumper cables became a necessity. Although the roads stayed in pretty good shape, they weren't good enough to keep some from getting stuck. And if there's anything worse than getting stuck, it's having to get out and push.
AAA Emergency Road Service.
Auto clubs like AAA were inundated with calls for help. So many that by noon, people were being told they'd have to wait up to 3 hours for service.
It's about 3 times the volume of a normal day. And 75% of all these calls we've got have been simple jump starts or won't starts, we call them. Sometimes a jump start will solve the problem, sometimes it won't.
And it's on days like this that you realize there are some jobs you'd probably never want. Today, Postman Brian McAllister walked much of his route like he always does. And he says it's not all that bad.
Actually, I'm warm.
Really?
I get too warm. I'm almost perspiring right now. You get used to being out, and I'm not cold at all.
The cold also created some beauty, but most people would probably trade that beauty for a nice 70-degree day. Jeff Fowler, News 4.
Everyone has trouble getting around in this weather. Travel to or from work, even a trip to the store can be a major undertaking. Another problem, the annoyance and danger of the bitter cold.
Mamie! It's Bill, are you up?
Good morning. How are you? No, not hardly. Am I late this morning?
No, you're just right on time.
Getting out and around for some elderly people is impossible in this weather. For those, there is the Senior Companions program. Friends helping older friends.
About those water faucets that froze up in there, what do you think we better do?
It's days like today that 84-year-old Mamie McCann needs a friend. A frozen pipe can be a disaster. Bel Casto has been Mamie's companion for almost a year now, and on days like today, she lends a hand.
She's just kind of like my mother, I tell you, really. She's just really grown on me because I really think a lot of her.
We don't got no dishes, we don't have no water. See, that's froze up, the hot water isn't.
Mamie and Belle will continue this relationship, hopefully on warmer days, days when pipes aren't frozen and walks don't need shoveling. But today, it's especially nice to have a friend.
All I can do is just comfort her and let her know I love her. That's the best thing, really, just show her I care.
Dan Slocum, News 4.
Yesterday, we set a peak because so many people apparently stayed indoors, turned on, their heating. I think I saw something about the fact that there's nobody out shopping, there's nobody out in the restaurants. People are staying inside where it's warm, obviously.
Opportunity here in this state, and I think that the overwhelming success we've had in the last
3 years, 3 institutions in juvenile service.
And so we were required by state statute to meet.
And has reinvested it in our programs. To say how much it costs.
What it really means is that to meet those standards, we're only placing kids in those programs that really need it, number one. And we have been able to amass the staff and the program expertise to provide them a real quality environment for them to get better.
Would you quietly put your weekly readers away? Get your reading books. The pages are on the board, or you may read enough.
Of course, we'll ask the court to force the school board to join in with us in coming up with an alternative plan like they did in the finger plan. The finger plan was not the school board's plan. It was not necessarily our plan. It was a court-ordered plan that at least one party agreed to. The school board did not necessarily agree to it, but we did.
The State House yesterday struggled through 39 amendments before finally calling it quits a little before dinner time.
I don't want any more liquor joints here, and I don't think the people voted to have more whiskey and open saloon places here.
It was a different story today. The lower chamber made short work of the remaining amendments and then approved the package without debate 73-21, moving on to other matters. Among key provisions the Senate receives: dual licensing by both municipalities and the state, a tax nearly doubling the price of liquor at the supplier level, and an amendment drying up counties which vote dry in local option elections. Senate President Roger Randall calls the House version a confused bill to be set aside. How about the 80% tax on liquor at the supplier level, though?
We've proposed a different taxing system that more conforms with what the rest of the country is doing. The House per bottle tax is only used in North Carolina. North Carolina has had bad experiences with trying to enforce the collection of those taxes.
Randall also predicts cities and counties will have input on zoning and where drinking might be allowed, but the final word on enforcement will rest with the state. With something to the governor, perhaps in a month or so. George Tomic, News 4, the state capitol.
Where the melody actually goes on that thing, Jack.
Doc Watson is no MD. He's a song surgeon. His specialty is pleasing audiences with traditional acoustic music. Doc has been blind for most of his 61 years, but his handicap has not held him back.
The handicap had little or nothing to do with developing the talent, because music is sound anyway, and you learn the space world without your eyes. It's not all that hard to figure out where the frets on a guitar are.
From Deep Gap, North Carolina, Mr. Doc Watson.
Last week, this doctor made his first house call to Oklahoma City. His prescription included folk, gospel, and blues music. More than 100 people had to be turned away from the theater center's center stage. The lucky ones who attended the concert were treated to an evening of songs and stories.
Come home some morning and find your daddy gone. Lord, I just keep on wondering why you won't go and leave a good man all alone. Let me do a little harmonica right here.
I love to do things that people enjoy. If I entertain an audience and they enjoy it, that's half of my pay. It's like getting your favorite toy when you was a kid at Christmas.
Doc's willing patients got a large dose of his country charm. They learned that this blind man's music can light the way for the rest of us. Scott Wallace, News 4 at the Oklahoma Theater Center.
Well, good evening.
In his opening remarks, Senator Boren wasted no time in letting the more than 300 farmers who packed this meeting hall know what he really thinks of the Stockman plan.
If he worked for me, I can tell you how long it would have taken before he was either writing his letter of apology or his letter of resignation. It was however long it took me to get to the nearest telephone and dial his number.
Senators Nichols and Boren and Congressman Watkins and English listened to testimony from just about every segment of the Oklahoma agricultural workforce. A banker told the panel that more than half of the farmers in one western Oklahoma community couldn't pay their notes. A dairy producer from Lawton spoke of an anniversary this year, but he said there would be no cause for celebration at his farm.
1985, a year of significance to me personally, Senator Boren. First, because it marks the 50th anniversary of my involvement in dairy farming. Second, because the year 1985, I faced the most dismal outlook for all those 50 years as a dairy farmer.
For many of these farmers, slashing the loan program would just be the tip of the iceberg. They say creating farm profits is the solution.
I personally don't want to borrow any more money. We had the opportunity to tell our former Senator Bellman in Washington almost 6 years ago that we didn't want to borrow any money, we want to make some money.
At the fairgrounds, Kurt Autry, News 4.
Given the fact that there was some work done on that tank about the time the girls were known to have disappeared, it's a logical thing that we ought to go out there and make sure that there's nothing in there. And that's as much as anything what that was they make sure they weren't. And sure enough, they weren't.
Drug trafficking, I think, was probably the biggest threat, and of course, we just don't know the potential as far as the people that come through Oklahoma who are also members of this organization. We feel that there's a possibility, since they are a very close-knit organization, that they could have been harboring some people that there are warrants outstanding for other places in the country, that type thing.
Northern Pottawatomie County is blessed by abundant water. That blessing is also a curse. Pottawatomie County commissioners have built hundreds of bridges across the area's many creeks. A number of those bridges are now falling down, and Pottawatomie County can't afford to fix them. This bridge just south of Pink dramatically points up the problem. This bridge caved in last fall and it was closed for several months. It was recently reopened. And in fact, a school bus crossed this bridge just last Thursday. And then Friday night, it caved in again.
Didn't have time to think very much. I just rode up on it and there it was, and I couldn't do anything about it, so.
Joe Smith discovered the bum bridge Friday night when his Jeep almost crashed into the swirling creek below it.
This bridge needs repaired and repaired right before it kills somebody. This is the second time that I've gone across the bridge in this kind of shape, so if it's not fixed, somebody's going to lose their life here. That's all there is to it.
Some area residents want the county to levy a 1-cent sales tax to pay for road and bridge repairs. Others don't think money will solve the problem.
I tell them, you guys don't need no more money. I said, if you had enough money to go out there and dig a hole, you'd dig a hole. If you had enough money to dig two, you'd dig two holes or one deeper.
The county's road and bridge woes will be discussed at a public meeting tonight at the Bethel School. Scott Wallace, News 4 in northern Pottawatomie County.
The House argued 2 days over the liquor issue. Today, the Senate proved why it's considered the elders of the legislature. Senators plowed through the 104-page liquor bill in less than 2 hours. There were attempts to change the measure, but few of the amendments survived. Lawton Senator Paul Tolliver lost his fight to raise the recommended liquor tax from 10 to 15%.
I just ask you to let's support this. And let's go on and collect the money that needs to be collected, and we'll satisfy the taxpayers.
There seemed to be a consensus. The Senate is pleased with its liquor by the drink bill. The measure passed 34 to 13. But there are some major differences between the liquor law the Senate wants and the law the House has sought. These differences mean the legislature isn't finished with liquor by the drink just yet. The liquor bill now advances to a House-Senate conference committee, and it's there that lawmakers will have to start playing the real game of politics. They'll have to compromise if the liquor bill is ever to become law. At the state capitol, Stephanie Frederick, News 4.
Attorneys for Icahn argued the law would seriously impede Icahn's $8 billion bid for Phillips in violation of the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. That clause prohibits states from exercising substantial control over interstate commerce. The Attorney General's office and the lawyers for Phillips argued that the law was designed only to protect the state's natural resources and would only minimally affect Icahn's tender offer. But Judge Dale Cook said the law would harm Icahn and was ambiguous.
We presume a statute or law to be constitutional, and our lawyers operate on that assumption, and we intend to argue its constitutionality.
I cannot characterize this as an effort to prevent Mr. Icahn from purchasing Phillips.
The hearing on the preliminary injunction that Icahn seeks against the law will be February 22nd. That is the same day that Phillips stockholders will meet in Bartlesville to vote on the company's recapitalization plan. Phillips will urge support for that plan in a newspaper advertisement it intends to begin running soon. That advertisement will also question Icahn's ability to borrow enough cash to support its tender offer. Forrest Lowry, Channel 6 Eyewitness News.